Welcome back to our Catechism Review. Today we're going to be doing the introduction to the Lord's Prayer. Yesterday we did the introduction to prayer in general, but today we're going to be looking at the words that are so familiar to most people, Our Father who art in heaven. So that's on page 237 of this version of the Catechism, and it only goes up through page 241, so it's a brief section, but there's actually a fair amount to talk about with that. The memory work is in the box on the top of page 237. With these words, God tenderly invites us to believe that He is our true Father and we are His true children. So with all boldness and confidence, we may ask Him as dear children, ask their dear Father. First, to begin with, just to clarify, when we talk about who art in heaven, that's just archaic language, meaning it's old-fashioned language. All it really means is our Father in heaven. Art just means are, or who is in heaven. Some people get confused by that. The reason that we do that with the old-fashioned language is because it's something that everybody knows. It comes really from the King James version of the English Bible, but people of all denominations and everything kind of know a lot of things from the Bible from that version that lasted several hundred years. And so you could try to update it, but then what would happen is you would just end up confusing people. That some people would be saying one thing and other people would be saying another thing. So with the Lord's Prayer, some churches do the same thing, like with the 23rd Psalm, the things that everybody kind of already knows a certain way. It's just easier to explain the old-fashioned language than it is to try to get everybody to switch something that they've learned from long ago. First thing I want to talk about, and today I'm not really going to focus so much on the particular questions and answers in here, but I encourage you to go through that with your family. I want to focus on that first word, our. And what do you notice about the word our? When we do this in class, we do a whole thing about pronouns on the board just to kind of establish what kind of word it is. But the important thing about it is that it's plural. You don't start to pray, my Father. And what that brings home to you is that you can't claim God as your Father without claiming the rest of the Christian church as your brothers and sisters in Christ. God won't let you do that. It's very interesting in the parable of the prodigal son. If you remember the story, the one son comes home and the father throws him a party, and then the older brother gets all mad and pouts about it. And the older brother says, when this son of yours comes back, you throw him a party. And the father says, no, wait a minute. This brother of yours, that you can't dissociate yourself, you can't exclude, you can't separate yourself from your brothers and sisters in Christ and then still claim God as your Father. He's the Father of the whole family of faith. So when you pray Our Father, you are claiming a personal, individual connection with God. You are His child, He is your Father. But you're also claiming a connection with the Christian church that you can't get out of just because you don't like that person or there's some problems or whatever. It's a family prayer, plural, the very first word, and it's possessive. God is yours, you are His. It's a close familial relationship, but it doesn't just involve you and God. It involves the Christian church and God, and you are a part of that. The second word is Father, and this is, for some people, kind of problematic because not everybody has the same experience with fatherhood in this world. Some people, the word Father brings a lot of harsh associations and difficulties, and it can be hard to get over that. That's why, in the explanation it talks about this dear Father. You have to think of what the picture of fatherhood is, what ideal fatherhood is, what fatherhood should be, not what it is in our real experience. Because really every human dad is a sinner who's messed up the role of fatherhood. And their fathers were sinners. So you have to think of what is meant by fatherhood. What is the role supposed to be? And we usually do this in class by saying, let's picture a perfect father. What would that person be like? And it's somebody who provides and protects and cares for and disciplines and teaches and loves, keeps you secure, all of those things, but especially doing it all with love. That's what the kind of father we're talking about. And it's supposed to be for earthly fathers to exemplify that or to illustrate that, but of course we all fall short. And some people have really no experience with their earthly father at all, and so they're at a big disadvantage. So it's really important when we talk about our Father who art in heaven, that we're talking about what fatherhood is supposed to be. And we seek to live up to that in this world, but we realize that human fatherhood doesn't live up to God's kind of fatherhood. And then you get these words, in heaven. And right away, this establishes the Lord's Prayer as a prayer of homesickness. If you've ever talked to somebody who's homesick, it's not that any one thing is wrong when you're homesick. It's that everything is wrong because you're not at home. I like to illustrate this with a story from basic training in the Army. They make the first couple of weeks of basic training just on purpose. They make it miserable in every way. No matter if they can figure out a way to make it miserable, they do it. Nobody gets enough sleep. Nobody, you're just getting up at 5 in the morning and doing brutal exercises, and then you're getting yelled at for this or that, and you're cleaning, and then you're memorizing stuff, and then you're getting yelled at some more. They just make it so that everybody's uptight and miserable and tired, and you have no connection. Now, back when I was in basic training, there wasn't any such thing as cell phones and the internet and everything. But even then, you didn't even get to use the payphone. You were totally cut off, and for the first week or two, you didn't even get your mail. And then finally, after the first section of basic training was over, they said that everybody could go make a phone call on the payphone where you had to, dial in or call collect or whatever. And there was one guy in the platoon next to ours who was older than everybody. He was 25, I think, and the rest of us were all about 18 or so and 19. And he was a teacher already, and he was a wrestling coach from North Dakota. The guy was huge. He looked like an action figure. And he got to the front of the line, and I noticed that it happened with him the same way it happened with several other guys. He got on the phone, and all of a sudden he started to cry. And everybody kind of started to laugh at him a little bit. Here's this big stud of a man crying. And what it was he heard the voices on the other end of the phone. And it happened to more than just him. It was people would hear their dog or their little sister, or they would hear their mom and dad talking in the background, and they would say, here's this connection to back home, to my room, where everything is right. And here I'm stuck in Fortsville, Oklahoma, where everything is wrong. And that connection just makes it clear how unlike home basic training was. Well, when we say, our Father who art in heaven, where your Father is where you are at home. And we say, our Father who art in heaven, you are, he is the King of the heavenly kingdom, but we're here in this world, and things are not as they're supposed to be. We aren't surrounded by righteousness. We have problems, we have difficulties, we have all kinds of reasons for calling out to God our Father and realizing that we're calling out to our home, to where our family is, to where we are perfectly ourselves, to where we belong, and we realize just how much this life in this world isn't it. So the whole Lord's Prayer is one of calling home, with that sense of separation, with that sense of yearning and that longing, that there are certain things about our lives, about our very souls, that only God can satisfy. We can be perfectly ourselves as we were meant to be when we call home to God. So it's the Christian church, it's God is our Father. That means it's a personal relationship. God isn't a concept. He's not an idea. He's not some sort of force. But it's a personal, familial relationship with the Creator of the universe and the Christian church, and you're a part of that. And it's also this acknowledgement that there is a world where things are as they're supposed to be, where God is and rules visibly, and then there's this world where God only rules by faith. And when we call out to God as our Father, we're making that connection. And again, from yesterday, we talked about how God commands us to pray, He invites us to pray, He wants to hear us pray. And so the Lord's Prayer gives us the prayer to use, and it begins, Our Father, who art in heaven. And we'll talk more about what we call the petitions of the Lord's Prayer coming up. Thanks.